All right, guys, so it looks like we ran into a problem there. So I'm going to wait and make sure that people that are not my Facebook friend can actually see this video. So I'm going to give this a minute or two. I'm obviously going to have to start over because so many people missed stuff. And I was probably good halfway through everything. So I am T of Sewing by T. That's my sewing blog. And also Simply by T, which is my fabric shop. And I am really excited to have you join me here for this sewing course. I am waiting to make sure that I get comments from people that have not. All right, so there's one person, but I know she's my Facebook friend. So I'm waiting to see people that are not my friend. All right, that's great. Now we've got everybody joining. Okay, so on the plus side, people that are not my Facebook friend got to miss out on the part where I was all like super nervous and stumbling over myself. So I'm T of Sewing by T. Sewing by T is my sewing blog. And then I've got Simply by T, which is my fabric shop. And if you've never been over there, of course, at the end of the video, I'll share links. But my goal here today is to make sure that you have the confidence to sew the fabric in the Simply by T shop. Because that's the whole point, right? If you buy fabric, you want to make sure that you can use it to sew the things that you want to sew and really get the results that you want. So I'm really excited to have everybody join me here for the first part of our 3-part live sewing series. And it's a whole progression. So if you watch today's video, you're going to want to watch tomorrow's. And if you miss something, it's going to stay on the Facebook page for 2 weeks. So that means you have time to go back, review things. I'm going to be sure that I share my links so that you know where I shop, so that you can get the same kind of discounts that I get, because the less money that we spend on supplies, the more money we can spend on fabric, right? So what do you need to sew garments? Because that's probably the most important thing. Is this fabric from Simply by T is for sewing garments. It's not for making quilts. I guess you could make an apron, but you know what? That's not what I specialize in. So you need needles. And I actually really only keep 3 needles on hand for the fabrics in the shop. I personally use 80-12 universal needles for the woven fabrics in the shop, and those are going to be the stretch denim, stretch twill, stretch chambray, and stretch poplin. Those are our 4 stretch woven fabrics, and I use a universal needle on those. I only use the 80-12. Sometimes I may have a top stitching needle that I'll use for things like making jeans, but honestly, I really just use the 80-12 universal for just about everything. The other kind of needle that you're going to need is a needle for knit fabrics, and there's 2 types of needles for that type of project. You have your stretch needle, and then you have what's called a jersey or ballpoint needle. Your stretch needle is mostly used for swimsuits, leotards, and really, really tight-fitting exercise clothing. So if you're just making a regular t-shirt for everyday wear, you do not need a stretch needle. And not only that, older machines can't handle a stretch needle, so that might not even be a choice for your machine. So what I do use is a jersey ballpoint needle, and I keep in for the fabrics in the shop 80-12s and 75-10s. And when we start talking about the specific fabrics that we carry and how to use them effectively, I will tell you exactly which needle I use under which circumstances. So there will be no guessing. Now, I go through probably about 150 needles in a year. So I change my needle approximately every other day. And Joanne sells needles. They're 5 to a pack usually, and usually around the price range of about 53 cents a piece. So for 100 needles, I would pay $53. I actually buy my needles on eBay. I buy Oregon needles. I buy them in packs of 100, and they're about $12 for 100. So that saves me tons and tons of money, about $41 per 100 needles, which I can then spend on fabric instead of needles. So don't use dull needles on your projects. Make sure that you always have enough needles on hand. And I have to admit that if you have 100 needles of one type, it's going to take you a while to sew through them, even if you sew like me. So we talked about needles. Next up, we need to cover thread. So I will admit that I used to be a firm believer in buying Coats & Clark dual duty thread. It's not fancy thread. You can get it at Walmart. It absolutely works. Doesn't cause a lot of problems, except that it drops fuzz everywhere. And I was spending a lot of time cleaning out the inside of my machine. But I was this firm believer that I wasn't going to spend money on thread. I was wrong. Okay, so I make mistakes. I was wrong. I recently tried out Gutermann Mara thread, and I was actually surprisingly impressed. I'm not ending up having to clean out the inside of my machine all the time. I'm not having thread breakage. It's not shredding inside my needle, which happens sometimes if I got a bad spool of Coats & Clark. And the really cool thing is I can get these giant size spools of thread. And this is just white, regular sewing thread. This is not serger thread. I buy them in white, black, and gray, and 90% of the time, that is what I use to sew. So unless I'm top stitching something or really care about what the inside of my garment looks like, I'm either using white, black, or gray from that giant spool, which lasts me like forever. I order my thread on wallwack.com because they have some of the best sales you're going to ever see on thread. But not only that, their regular price is just way cheaper than Joann's anyway, and I get my packages in about 48 hours. So I'm not likely to run out of thread when you have a giant spool, and you usually know when you're getting close. But the best way to make sure that you have lots of thread is to follow their deals, because like I said, if you save money on supplies, you have more money for fabric, right? If you have a serger, you need serger thread. I don't like the Joann's brand serger thread. I found that just like the Coats & Clark dual duty, it sheds lots of threads all over the place, makes a mess, and isn't as strong. So I actually started buying Maxi Lock through Wallwack. And the thing I like best is that when they have a good sale, it's $1.89 a spool, which is, practically free. Well, not free, but I stock up. I usually buy them 20, 40 spools at a time. And then that way I have enough thread to last me through the year. Although occasionally I run out of white, but it's one of those things. For $1.89, I can afford to just use a different color. All right, so we've got thread, we've got needles, we need a sewing machine. When I was first learning how to sew, I bought this really cheap $80 sewing machine at Walmart. And I have to tell you, I fought with that machine for like 5 years. And for the longest time, I thought I was the worst seamstress. Like, I'm not talking bad. I'm talking so awful. Everything I made, I threw away. And nobody wants to throw away that much fabric. So it turns out that my machine was a lemon. And when I bought a new machine that was at a slightly higher price point, I didn't have problems anymore, and I wasn't a bad seamstress. So if you are fighting with your machine, don't assume it's you. It could just be the machine. So I don't like really cheap machines. I do have a really high-end Viking, and it's a good machine. But my backup machine is a Janome Hello Kitty. So that means I have a giant Hello Kitty on my sewing machine. But that has the most beautiful straight stitch I've ever seen, and it's not a super high price point. So if you're looking to upgrade your machine, I will include some links at the end of the video of some machines that I think would be worth your just little bit upgrade from that $100 machine you might have gotten at Walmart, and we're only talking about $20 more. So what does your machine need to have so that you can sew garments? There's only one thing, and most people are going to have this. You need a zigzag stitch. That's it. You don't need anything fancy. You just need a zigzag stitch, and most modern machines are going to have a zigzag stitch. But there are some things that would be nice to have when you're sewing with knit garments. So if your machine has adjustable presser foot pressure, and I have to tell you, I practiced saying that over and over again so I wouldn't get it wrong. Adjustable presser foot pressure allows you to adjust the pressure that your machine is placing on the fabric. If you can adjust that and turn it down, you're not going to have your seam stretching out on your knit fabric. So if you have that, use it on your knit fabrics. It's going to save your life. But let's say your machine doesn't have that because my Janome Hello Kitty does not. All you need is a walking foot. So walking foot plus knit fabric equals not stretched out seams, or adjustable presser foot pressure. That's what you need. Most modern machines are going to have more than just a regular zigzag. And my favorite stitch for sewing knit fabrics is going to be a lightning bolt stitch. And it looks literally like a little lightning bolt, and it has enough stretch that your seams aren't going to pop, but it looks straight from the right side when you pull your seams apart. So lightning bolt stitch is ideal. If you don't have that, you're going to set a skinny zigzag stitch, and that will do a similar thing. All right, so we've got needles, thread, a sewing machine. Now you're going to need some patterns. I don't use paper patterns, and I know some of my friends love paper patterns, but let me tell you, paper patterns you can get them really inexpensively. Joann has some amazing deals, and they are consistently drafted. So if you're using one brand of paper pattern, you make a certain adjustment, you can trust that those adjustments are going to fit all the way across the brand. My problem with paper patterns is that stupid tissue paper. Once I take my pattern out of that packaging, that tissue paper is never going to fold up and go back in that little envelope. And I have to admit, I've thrown more than one pattern away just because I couldn't shove it back in the envelope. So if you like paper patterns, that's super cool. You have lots of options available to you. I like PDF patterns. And the thing with PDF patterns is there are some really, really amazing designers out there. And then on the other hand, you have the really, really bad ones. And unfortunately, there's no way to just look at their website and know who's good and who isn't. And sometimes it's just a matter of, oh, well, this designer, that was one of their original patterns, but things have gotten better since then. I can't promise you success with all PDF patterns. I just can't do that. So if you're willing to take the risk, there are PDF patterns out there, and you can avoid the tissue paper situation, but then you have to print them and assemble them yourself. But I'm kind of creepy, and I like assembling the paper patterns. I don't know why. So it actually makes me happy to put all the little puzzle pieces together. I will include at the end of today's video, once I close everything out, I have a blog post with some free patterns that I do approve of. So you can test them out without having to spend money. You can decide, are paper patterns for you? Are they not for you? And do you like this specific designer as opposed to another designer? I'm not going to blast anybody and say, oh, so-and-so is not good, because that's not cool. But I will say, the patterns that I have lined up for you, they are good. You can trust that you're going to get an acceptable result from them. I can't vouch for every pattern that designer has ever made because I haven't sewn every pattern that they've ever made. That would be insane. All right, so that is the stuff that I had planned for today. I know it wasn't exciting or fun, but that is because tomorrow we get to talk about fabric, and that's the part I'm super excited about. So if you brought questions today, if you could start writing them in the comments, because I'm going to answer those. And I did have people that sent me questions, and I'm going to answer them as best I can, but they're a little more complicated than what I was expecting for this class. So I'm sorry if today was really boring, and I promise that on Wednesday we are going to talk about the really cool fabric stuff and how to make it really work for you. If you found this class helpful, please share. That obviously gets more people a chance to come see me talk about fabric tomorrow, which is the part that I'm really, really excited about. Like, can you tell I'm really excited about fabric? It's the one thing that will put a smile on my face. If you follow my sewing blog, you know that I don't smile a lot because I just don't. But fabric will make me happy. So that was one thing I've been thinking about this whole time was fabric. I was like, smile, you're talking about fabric. It's good stuff. Like I said, I'm going to have my free patterns blog post, and I will link it in the comments so you can check it out later. If you are not watching this video live and you have a question, please, 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 please send it to me, because I can't answer your question if you don't tell me what it is, and I'm not a mind reader. You have to remember that this stuff is just all old hat to me. I don't think about it anymore. I just do it. So if you have a question, you can email it to me at simplybyti@gmail.com, or you can go to my Facebook page and send me a message there. All right, so questions. Melissa, I will be happy to share that eBay link with you. I swear, I almost wonder if I'm keeping them like in business because of all the needles that I've bought from them over time. So I've got a couple of questions. And one of the questions I received today is a really advanced question, but I think it's important to answer here. So someone asked where or what to line a fabric with. And that is not a question you can just answer, because what you line a fabric with has everything to do with your intent of the final product, how you're going to wear it, how you're going to sew it. It's way, way complicated. So if you ever have a question like, hey, T, what should I line this fabric from your shop with? Please, when you're sending me that question, tell me what pattern you're planning on using or how you're planning on using it so I can answer your question completely. Another thing that I was asked about is, what about sewing with sheer fabrics? So we don't carry a lot of sheer fabrics in the shop. We do have our stretch lace, which is lace, so it is fairly sheer, and we do have our sweater knits. And both of those, your best use of them is going to be a French seam, because you're going to be able to enclose all of that inside. And I forget what it's called, but you can also go back through and tack that seam from the front so that it doesn't flip around inside the garment. So that's going to be really useful if you're sewing sheer fabrics, but that's not something that we cover a lot with our fabrics because that's not something we carry. Finally, I had somebody send me a really complicated fit question. And so I have to tell you that when you're checking the fit of a garment, you have to think about the fact that the person needs to be standing straight up and down with their arms at the exact angle to tell where the fit problem is. I have to admit that I am not perfect at fitting. I know how to solve my fit problems, but I don't know how to solve all fit problems. I'd be happy to help you try to figure it out, but I can't promise I have the answer because I am a seamstress that is learning about fitting and not a tailor, so I don't know how to go through and fix garments that are already done, and I'm still on my fit journey, but I fit my body very well. Valley Ann over here says to post the name of my regular sewing machine. I own a Viking Opal 670, and I'll be glad to share a link when I finish up this video. And my sewing needles, I buy them on eBay, but I will share the links for that too at the end. So I am just over 17 minutes, so I stuck to my 15-minute plan. If anybody else has questions, I'd love to answer them for you. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and close this out and start sharing those links with everybody. So thank you for joining me. Don't forget to check back in on Wednesday when we get to talk about the good stuff. I'm going to share everything that I know about the fabrics in my fabric shop, how to sew them, how to hem them, different sewing techniques that might work when one thing isn't working. And Melissa, I'm sorry to hear that your lightning bolt stitched isn't working for you, but maybe we can work that out too. So Brenda, I will also link for the thread over at Wallwack. I swear I buy so much stuff from them when they have their sales. So I get like this giant size box of thread, which probably looks ridiculous and freaks my husband out, but then I don't have to buy thread again. So I guess that makes him happy. All right. Thanks everybody for joining me, and I will see you back here on Wednesday.